Hi all, I'm here to explain the concept of preventive/negative checks. One thing I want to preference before I explain the concept of this term in more detail is that this is a very important thing to keep in mind, as positive-negative checks are very similar concepts, as they both deal with having the population lower than the amount of food that can be produced. Although this is the case, negative checks deal with the limits of population through the lowering of fertility rate / decreasing the crude birth rate, while positive checks mainly deal with increasing a mortality rate. So why was this concept created? So negative checks was a concept that was basically supposed to counter positive checks, as positive checks only occur once it reaches that threshold of going past the amount of resources. That is when positive checks occur, as nature is trying to create a balance in a time of imbalance. So negative checks are basically a concept that is trying to prevent the population from going over that threshold. So negative checks, as mentioned before, basically control the population growth through reducing of fertility rates. And one thing to keep in mind is that Malthus created this concept before the widespread of contraceptives, also known as birth controls. But this was only mainly to lower developed countries, as the developed countries during this time did have forms of birth control that was pretty accessible, and the idea of family planning. So this concept was mainly more geared towards the developing countries. We're just going to see a visual here. You can see it's kind of like the other graph of positive checks if you have seen that video, but as you can see, the population is not actually exceeding the amount of resources this time. This is mainly due to negative checks, preventive checks, as these families are lowering their fertility rates. And we're going to go into some examples. So some examples include abstinence from sex and also later marriages. And later marriages also include empowerment of women, as that leads to women furthering their degrees, which results in them getting married later, and would also have women going into more jobs, which will also lead to later marriages. But these examples try to limit the fertility rate of families, as Malthus believed that having the population exceed the amount of resources would result in catastrophes.